The voice that spoke was female, clear and pleasant to the ear. QiaoAnHao instinctively turned her head and saw LinThiY standing beside her, smiling sincerely as she shook hands with Producer Sun. Producer Sun said, "Shiyi, it's been a long time since we last worked together." LinThiY replied, "I hope this collaboration with President Sun will be enjoyable." While LinThiY and Producer Sun were exchanging greetings, Zhao Meng seemed to suddenly remember something. She leaned close to QiaoAnHao's ear and whispered, "Chao Chao, LinThiY was originally cast as the second female lead in this drama, but you unexpectedly swooped in and took the role, pushing her down to the third female lead. This woman holds grudges and is very good at pretending. Especially in front of the director and producers, she loves to act like she's on good terms with everyone. You'd better be careful." Before Zhao Meng could finish her sentence, LinThiY suddenly turned her head. Zhao Meng immediately shut her mouth and smiled politely at LinThiY. LinThiY also smiled warmly, but then turned to QiaoAnHao and said sweetly, "AnHao, long time no see." QiaoAnHao knew of LinThiY. She was the fastest signed female artist at Huangying Media in the past 2 years. Even though they belonged to the same company, QiaoAnHao had never interacted with LinThiY before, let alone appeared in public together. LinThiY was known for her arrogance. How could she possibly talk to QiaoAnHao? So when LinThiY called her name so warmly and wore such a familiar and enthusiastic expression, QiaoAnHao couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. Then, recalling Zhao Meng's warning, she immediately understood. For LinThiY to remember her name, she must have already found out that QiaoAnHao took her role. LinThiY must be harboring great resentment, yet she was deliberately putting on a facade of friendliness and warmth. It really was a tough act. If LinThiY wanted to pretend, then QiaoAnHao would play along. After all, no one wanted to leave a bad impression in front of the producer. QiaoAnHao instantly smiled, as if they really were close friends, and spoke warmly, "Sister Shiyi, we haven't met in so long, and you've become even more beautiful." Of course, LinThiY knew QiaoAnHao was acting. Her expression didn't reveal any cracks. In fact, her smile became even gentler and more affectionate. "Not at all. QiaoAnHao, you're the one who looks even prettier." Then LinThiY turned to Producer Sun and warmly introduced QiaoAnHao. "President Sun, this is QiaoAnHao, our drama's second female lead. Don't be fooled by her being a newcomer. She's got great skills." After speaking, LinThiY looked back at Producer Sun and in an even friendlier tone said, "President Sun, this is QiaoAnHao, playing the second female lead. Though she's new, her acting is quite good." How could QiaoAnHao not realize that this introduction was for Producer Sun's benefit, making LinThiY seem like she kindly supported newcomers? As for her acting skills, LinThiY had never seen her act. How could she possibly know if she was good or not? She was clearly making it up.
QiaoAnHao thought this inwardly, but smiled even brighter on the outside. She reached out to shake hands with Producer Sun, her words even more exaggerated than LinThiY's fabricated compliments. "Hello, President Sun. Don't listen to Sister Shiyi's teasing. I'm just a newcomer who still has a lot to learn. But I often hear Sister Shiyi mention you, saying how professional you are. She loves working with you the most." If it was all about flattery and creating a good impression on Producer Sun, then QiaoAnHao could play that game too. Hearing QiaoAnHao's words, Producer Sun smiled warmly. When his gaze fell upon QiaoAnHao, a flash of admiration crossed his eyes. There were plenty of beautiful women in the entertainment industry, but many of them had undergone cosmetic surgery, and upon closer look, they often appeared somewhat similar or unnatural. But this girl before him was naturally beautiful, with delicate, refined features that made her stand out, pure and elegant. Meanwhile, standing to the side, LinThiY kept a smile on her face, but her eyes showed a trace of coldness as she looked at QiaoAnHao. After finishing their small talk with producer Sun, the other guests had mostly arrived, and everyone began to take their seats. Producer Sun deliberately chose the seat beside QiaoAnHao. Once everyone was seated, QiaoAnHao noticed that there were still 4 empty seats opposite her. Who else hadn't arrived? Just as QiaoAnHao was scanning the table to see who was missing, the door was pushed open and 3 people walked in. It was the famous director Qingsheng Shijian, the female lead Song Xion-su, and the male lead Chang Yang. In recent years, Chang Yang had been the only rising male star second to LuCanNien, climbing the ranks of stardom. Of course, Chang Yang's success was largely thanks to LuCanNien, who had taken him under his wing, bringing him along for films and television appearances over the past 2 years. As for Song Xiang-su, she was already a senior in the entertainment industry, a renowned actress, a goddess figure, the female counterpart of LuCanNien. "Sorry for being late, we were stuck in traffic," director Qingsheng Shijian explained, with a friendly smile after sitting down. Chang Yang also apologized politely to everyone before sitting down gracefully. As for Song Xiang-su, she simply gave a light nod to everyone as a greeting and then elegantly took her seat. The service staff in the room, seeing that most of the seats were filled, stepped forward and softly asked, "Is everyone here? Should we start serving the food?" Producer Sun waved his hand and said, "Wait a moment, someone else hasn't arrived yet." In a production team, the producer and the director were the highest-ranking people. Now that both were present, yet they weren't starting the meal and said they were still waiting for someone, the people at the table couldn't help but be curious. Someone asked, "Who else hasn't arrived?" The director responded, "Our drama's second male lead." The second male lead? Everyone was even more surprised. Even the male lead didn't keep them waiting like this. But now the second male lead could? Who exactly was this person?
Even QiaoAnHao couldn't help but feel a surge of curiosity. In the script, the second female lead and the second male lead were opposing characters, but until now, she still didn't know who her co-star would be. Producer Sun, seeing everyone's eager expressions, was about to speak and reveal the answer with a mysterious smile when the door suddenly opened once again. Instinctively, Producer Sun turned his head to look, and the words caught in his throat. He immediately stood up quickly. Following the producer's reaction, everyone at the table also turned to look toward the door. Producer Sun broke into a cheerful smile and warmly greeted, "Mr. Lu, you finally arrived. Please come in, take a seat." QiaoAnHao also turned to look toward the door, but before she could fully turn, she heard Producer Sun say the words, "Mr. Lu." Her heart trembled violently, and before she could even process who Mr. Lu was, she saw LuCanNien stride in calm and poised. Around her, she heard the faint sound of people gasping softly, mixed with whispers. So the second male lead is movie king Lu? My God! No wonder they kept this under wraps. This is huge news. I bet it'll blow up on Weibo later. Although LuCanNien was an actor by profession, his status was completely different. He was the CEO of Huangying Media. 90% of the celebrities sitting here were signed under Huangying Media, and the biggest investor behind Qingshan Suzhen was none other than LuCanNien himself. On one hand, everyone marveled at why the producer and director were willing to wait so obediently. And on the other hand, they all stood up in unison with the producer. QiaoAnHao took quite a while to process this news. Even when everyone else had already stood, she was still sitting there blankly until Zhao Man gave her a sharp pinch, prompting her to quickly stand up. LuCanNien's expression remained calm and indifferent as always. Faced with everyone standing to greet him, he didn't show any reaction. He simply walked steadily to the only empty seat, pulled out the chair, and sat down. Those who had interacted with LuCanNien before were used to his reserved personality, so seeing him sit down, the producer followed suit and everyone else did the same. The producer called for the server to bring over the menu, then personally handed it to LuCanNien. "Mr. Lu, would you like to order something?" LuCanNien didn't even glance at the menu and simply replied in a cool, detached tone, "Anything's fine." Faced with LuCanNien's cold demeanor, the producer wasn't the least bit offended. On the contrary, he smiled as he opened the menu, carefully selecting the most expensive and high-quality dishes, placing a full order. Then he invited the others at the table to order. But with the presence of Mr. LuCanNien from Huangying Media at the top and the producer and director below him, which actor would dare to shamelessly place their own food order? So whenever the server passed the menu to someone, they would humbly pass it along to the next person.
34. Only song. Tuong Tu calmly accepted the menu, naturally opened it, chose a few dishes she liked, and ordered 2 items without hesitation. It wasn't until the menu was passed in front of QiaoAnHao that she finally recovered from the shock of learning that LuCanNien was playing the second male lead. She smiled gently at the server beside her and shook her head, indicating that she wouldn't order anything, then handed the menu back to the server. Once the server took the menu and left with a polite smile, QiaoAnHao finally lifted her gaze and glanced at LuCanNien, seated directly opposite her. Under the soft yellow lights of the room, a faint glow illuminated his face, making him seem distant and unattainable. Sitting next to him was the lead director. The director seemed to be saying something to him, and LuCanNien slightly inclined his head, listening calmly and indifferently. As if sensing QiaoAnHao's gaze, LuCanNien suddenly lifted his eyes and looked straight at her. Startled, QiaoAnHao quickly turned her head away and pretended to chat casually with Zhaoman. Just one glance at LuCanNien, and she almost got caught staring. From that moment until the dishes were brought out, QiaoAnHao didn't dare glance at LuCanNien again, not even once. A banquet like this, of course, couldn't be without wine. Perhaps because of LuCanNien's presence, producer Sun generously opened 2 bottles of Royal Salute, then instructed the staff to fill everyone's glasses. They all toasted 3 rounds, and in no time, the atmosphere at the table became lively, and everyone started chatting enthusiastically. LuCanNien, however, remained quiet the entire time. When others approached to toast him, he didn't say a word, but would politely raise his glass and drink. When others greeted him, he would give a slight nod. Yet the coldness lingering in his eyes made it seem as though he existed in a world separate from everyone else. At gatherings like this, most people busied themselves networking and building connections. But because of LuCanNien's presence, QiaoAnHao remained reserved and restrained. Unlike the other actors who constantly sought out the producer and director to chat and toast, she only showed her warm and gentle smile when conversing with others. In contrast to QiaoAnHao's restraint, Song Tuong Tu seemed even more out of place at this banquet. She appeared to have only come to eat, sitting gracefully in her seat, elegantly using her chopsticks to pick up food, occasionally sipping from a glass of water beside her. Midway through the banquet, producer Sun, seated next to QiaoAnHao, suddenly seemed to remember something. He turned his head, glanced at QiaoAnHao, and then spoke. "I almost forgot. Most of us here have worked together before, and even if not, we're at least familiar faces. So I'd like to introduce a newcomer to everyone, our second female lead." Producer Sun originally intended to say QiaoAnHao's full name, but could only recall her last name, Qiao, forgetting the rest. So he paused for a moment, then turned his head to QiaoAnHao and said, "Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?" The producer's sudden introduction caught QiaoAnHao completely unprepared, but she still naturally stood up, nodded slightly to everyone at the table, and spoke in a clear, gentle voice. "Hello, everyone. I'm QiaoAnHao. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to work with all of you. Thank you." After QiaoAnHao sat down, the producer took the lead and started clapping, prompting the others to applaud as well. The only person who had remained silent, quietly eating, was Song Tuong-tu. But after QiaoAnHao finished her introduction, she looked up. Facing QiaoAnHao's radiant beauty, her eyes revealed a trace of surprise, mixed with evaluation. Once the applause ended, the producer, seeking to build rapport with LuCanNien, turned to him and said, "Mr. Lu, in this film, An-hao will be your co-star." Hearing this, LuCanNien lifted his eyelids slightly and glanced briefly in QiaoAnHao's direction. QiaoAnHao was so nervous that her palms were covered in sweat, but she still tried her best to maintain a calm demeanor. Around the table, no one knew about the real relationship between QiaoAnHao and LuCanNien. They simply saw them as strangers. Therefore, the producer turned back to QiaoAnHao and said, "An-hao, why are you just sitting there? Go greet Mr. Luke and get acquainted. You two will be working together closely from now on." Since the producer had spoken so clearly, QiaoAnHao, despite her anxiety, had no choice but to pick up the wine glass in front of her. She stood up and softly said to LuCanNien, "Mr. Lu, it's an honor to meet you. I hope we'll have a pleasant collaboration." LuCanNien sat indifferently in his high seat, his eyes lowered as he stared at the wine glass in front of him, completely unresponsive. QiaoAnHao gripped her glass tighter, slightly raising it in an attempt to maintain her composure. She knew that he disliked her, and that in front of others he always pretended not to know her. Even now, when she was reluctantly trying to be polite, was he still unwilling to acknowledge her? After a long moment, LuCanNien finally shifted his gaze, still without sparing QiaoAnHao a glance. He simply picked up his wine glass and downed it in one go. Only then did QiaoAnHao quietly exhale and quickly raised her own glass, finishing her drink before sitting back down. But just as she had barely settled into her seat, a clear and sweet female voice suddenly rang out, "An-hao is a newcomer, yet she gets to work with Mr. Lu. Her luck is truly remarkable." The one who spoke was LinThiY. At first listen, her words seemed harmless, as if she was genuinely admiring QiaoAnHao's good fortune. But anyone who listened carefully would catch the key phrase in her sentence, "a newcomer." A mere newcomer, able to work with LuCanNien, while even LinThiY, who had been in the entertainment industry for so long, lost the role to her. Could it really be explained away as just luck? In that instant, everyone around the table couldn't help but feel that something about QiaoAnHao didn't seem quite right.
The atmosphere at the table suddenly became tense. Everyone, whether openly or covertly, cast their gaze toward QiaoAnHao. Of course, QiaoAnHao knew what everyone was thinking. After all, she had indeed exchanged her body for this role. This left her feeling insecure, and for a moment, she didn't know how to react, leaving her with a blank, frozen expression. Her dazed appearance, combined with her silence, made her seem like someone whose secret had just been exposed, awkward and flustered. The mood at the table sank even further. QiaoAnHao felt a wave of shame and fear. She felt ugly, dirty, as if at any moment her secret would be laid bare for all to see. Zhao Mang, as QiaoAnHao's agent, was also worried, racking her brain to come up with a way to diffuse the awkwardness. Just when the atmosphere was at its most strained, LuCanNien, sitting across from QiaoAnHao, suddenly lifted his gaze and looked directly at her. The girl lowered her eyes, pretending to stay calm, but the way she pressed her lips together betrayed her anxiety. LuCanNien stared at QiaoAnHao for about 5 seconds, then shifted his gaze without a hint of emotion. His voice, cold enough to freeze the air, broke the silence. "Miss Lin, there's a saying in the entertainment industry. Haven't you heard of it? Luck is also a form of strength." At first glance, LuCanNien's words seemed casual, but in fact,
He was telling everyone at the table that while QiaoAnHao may have gotten this role by luck, it was still because she was capable enough to play the second female lead. There was no hidden agenda behind it. At the same time, the deeper implication of his words was clear. LinThiY lost the role simply because she wasn't strong enough. QiaoAnHao didn't know why LuCanNien suddenly spoke up to defend her, but her heart fluttered with emotion. She knew that at this moment she had to respond appropriately. So she quickly curved her lips into a smile and humbly said, "I still have much to learn from all the seniors and teachers here. I hope that when filming starts, I won't hold anyone behind." LuCanNien's words carried great weight, and now QiaoAnHao's humble attitude only further improved everyone's impression of her. In an instant, the people at the table changed their view of her and began praising her with a few kind words before shifting the topic of conversation elsewhere. LinThiY sat quietly on one side, still wearing a polite smile, but her expression looked somewhat strained. She had wanted to make things difficult for QiaoAnHao, yet instead, she had ended up shooting herself in the foot. If not for QiaoAnHao, she would have been the one acting alongside LuCanNien. Everyone in the industry dreamed of working with LuCanNien on a project. That was the ultimate goal for any actress. After the banquet, QiaoAnHao went to the restroom. By the time she came out, the cast and crew had already left. Since there was no parking spot nearby, Zhao Meng had taken the opportunity to retrieve the car while QiaoAnHao was in the restroom. QiaoAnHao stood at the hotel entrance, waiting for Zhao Meng. As she waited, she saw LuCanNien walking out of the hotel.